Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Industries Live. It is a beautiful, sunny Tuesday morning here in Seattle. If you're in Seattle, you know I'm absolutely lying. It's a classic Seattle rainy Tuesday morning, but hopefully that's going to change before too much longer. But nonetheless, very, very excited to be with you for another exciting episode of Industries Live. Industries Live is one of my favorite times of the week. For those of you who've been tuning in, you'll know we do it every other Tuesday. So we alternate between financial services and media entertainment. We have some fantastic guests in for you today, and I think we're going to have a very, very interesting conversation. My name is Michael Schmidt. I look after the Global Industry and Partner Solutions Center of Excellence technical team. We help our partners and customers build solutions, be successful in AWS. We look across lots of different industries, from everything from media entertainment, financial services, of course, but also things like travel and hospitality, energy, the list goes on and on. So, one of the best things about my job is I get a really broad view across lots of different industries and what's happening in the journey of customers and partners in lots of different industries. I'm going to introduce my partner in crime here, Addy. Why don't you introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Thanks, Michael. Hey, everyone. I'm Addy Dubhashi. I lead our financial services partner solutions team. And so as part of the Center of Excellence, we work with our partners to build those industry-changing solutions that can accelerate our customers. And we're at our 11th episode today, so super excited to dive into one of the most anticipated topics there are. And I'm super excited to have Anthropic join our session today.
Awesome. Yes, me too. I think today is going to be riveting. Been very excited for this episode to come up. For those of you new to Industry Live, we talk with industry partners and customers about what they're seeing in their industry and what's going on for them. We often talk about specific examples and things like that. It's been a fascinating 24 months, 18 months even. I think if I think back about what generative AI has meant to us in our business in the last couple of years, it went from being a conversation about proof of concept to production last year, about thinking about what customers and partners could bring into production and how they could monetize and make the best value of generative AI after doing lots of proof of concepts. And this year, it's all about agentic AI and agents being the new apps, thinking about how to maximize the potential of using agentic AI, thinking about how to use agents in our business, agents that understand, think, and act, and really navigating the ethical and accountability challenges and while balancing the enormous productivity gains and efficiency gains that there are to be had with agentic AI. So today we're going to be talking about financial services, of course, regulated industries. So that particularly puts an interesting tone on the conversation. And we're joined today by Anthropic, JP and Alexander. So why don't we bring them on camera for the conversation? Good morning, JP. Good morning, Alexander. How are you both this morning?
Super. Pumped to be here. Thanks for having us, guys.
Awesome. We're so excited to have you. And I think, again, we're going to have a great conversation. Perhaps, why don't we start? I'll get the two of you to introduce yourselves, and then we'll get into it. So perhaps we'll start with you, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us on board today. My name is Alexander Bricken. I'm on the Applied AI product engineering team at Anthropic, and I lead some of our financial services implementations with our largest customers. Before Anthropic, which I've been at for roughly a year, I was at Palantir doing very similar stuff, working in financial services and leading engagements there too. I'll pass over to JP.
Thank you, sir. I'm JP, and I'm responsible for our global financial services vertical. So banks, insurance, asset management, and working with wonderful partners like AWS. Our role is to help make sure you, dialed in, get the most out of Claude. And that's what we focus on. And my partner in crime, Alexander, helps me bring that to life.
Awesome. JP, thanks so much. I really appreciate the introduction. And I think we'll get right into it. I guess, why don't we start with just, I'm interested in what you're seeing in terms of industry trends and what you're seeing in the market. Perhaps we'll start with some high level observations, maybe from you, JP, to start with.
It's a great question, Michael. I think the conversations we're having today, what's different mostly from the conversations of yesterday, is what the models are practically capable of now is no longer the bottleneck. As the capabilities become so robust, we find when we go deep into individual use cases for a bank partner, insurance partner, the real bottleneck and the real unlock actually lies in rolling up our sleeves and working with their infrastructure and their tech stack and navigating federated systems. So what we're seeing now is we're past the point of POC, and now partners are looking to actually deploy in production across multiple business units, multiple regions, but they need our help beyond just prompting a model. Also, how can they navigate their technological landscape to get the most out of Claude?
Excellent. How about you, Alexander? Anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, adding in on that. So just from a technical angle, what we see works really well is when we actually get in the room with customers and unpack those specific processes that they're thinking of when we're working towards a use case. So a lot of that, as JP mentioned, isn't necessarily the model's capability, but it's more so the coordination between different parties that have kind of individual silos of knowledge across the organization. If you can get those people in the same room and unpack that process from back to front, often it really helps to reveal some of those particular pain points that we think AI like Claude can solve.
Yeah,
Great answer.
Yeah, one of the fascinating parts in the way this journey is taken shape across AWS, even with Anthropic, is the speed with which customers are starting to see value, and they're moving from those early POCs to kind of production workloads. Within financial services, right, trends have been very specific to like internal productivity focused. So, hey, let's work with data that's inside the organization. Let's help those internal teams to get better at what they do. Help analysts kind of retrieve the right information at the right time. Speed claims processes and kind of make it really easy for, say, junior or learning agents to be able to operate at a more specialized scale through the insurance claims process. And banking, when it comes to like customer experience, kind of understanding that personalized recommendation that you can offer your customers. These are kind of key cases that we're seeing moving towards production. So on the AWS side, I think one of the fascinating kind of better together propositions we have with Anthropic is making it really easy for customers to start kind of proving it out with that proof of concept, but then setting up that path to production by setting up the right ML ops and the right controls around security and governance to kind of help them do that at scale. But yes, it's absolutely accelerating.
Great call, Addy. I guess the other thing that I would say I've observed with customers and partners, particularly over the last 12 months, and what has become something that needs to be done has now become absolutely critical, is like factoring in your plans around generative AI and into your whole data strategy, and your data strategy, your modernization strategy, your security strategy, your resilience strategy. It is, without that foundational layer and without the focus on that, you really stop short of being able to maximize the benefits you're going to get from your generative AI workloads. And so we're seeing a lot of customers and partners really kind of double down on their data strategy to ensure that they're really getting the best of it. I heard somebody say that, your train is only as fast as the slowest carriage, or whatever. I've heard a few versions of that metaphor, but at the end of the day, your end-to-end workflow is only going to be as agile and fast and productive as you make it. So I'll throw over to you, Addy. You want to ask the next question to our guest?
Yeah, absolutely. I know JP and Alexander are like on the ground living through a lot of these journeys. You're probably hearing this from customers across capital markets, banking, payments, insurance. And then we have the vector of regions, right? What's happening in North America? What's happening in EMEA and APJ? I think one of the main trends that we've seen is the financial services is regulated and compliance needs are there. But because most of the large institutions actually had invested into AI ML, building on SageMaker, experimenting and prototyping early, they were able to really move fast when it came to GenAI. So they kind of had an opportunity to keep that a deep understanding of their data, the way that data was cataloged, the way the catalogs were set up for publisher subscriber structures. And then the institutions that were far ahead have actually been able to make most of GenAI a lot faster. And the others are catching up. And so what I'm really curious on, JP, Alexander, what are y'all seeing in terms of the regionalization of GenAI? Are you seeing a difference between the mid-tier customers and the large customers? What's your view across subsectors also?
That's a great question, Addy. I think to overly simplify, the rate of adoption and implementation we see really closely mimics what I actually imagine AWS saw in the early days. You have your early adopters, nimble, small startups that are building their business on the back of an API like Claude. Then you've got next the digital natives, right? So we did a lot of work with our friends at Intuit, for instance, to help turbocharge their tax product, which is amazing if you haven't used it. this is core to their DNA. It's a digital first business, right? So not surprisingly, these digital natives are second to follow. And then you get the traditional enterprise, which is where most of mine and Alexander's time is spent, the big banks, big insurance companies. So while they're definitely not the first to move, if you think about the journey I just mapped out, they're moving. They're very motivated to move very quickly while also balancing what you touched on, the regulatory considerations and the safety and security considerations. So that's a high level overview. And at the same time, a regional level, Alexander and I just came back from Japan, and I was just spending time in EMEA. Overall, what we've observed is the US based organizations have moved the fastest. And there's been slower adoption or more reluctance to go full-blown production in the other regions, which, if you think about, doesn't shock me in a sense that most of the primary first-party model builders were on the West Coast of the USA, right? So you can imagine the first companies and organizations to start to dabble would have been probably called on by the OpenAIs and Anthropics of the world. But that's just a bit of what we're seeing in terms of adoption in the overall landscape. Anything else you wanted to add, Alexander?
Yeah, I think there are a few things to unpack here. So specifically within enterprise industries, there are different types of use cases that we see that end up being more or less successful when compared to the regulatory environment of FSI. So, for example, you might have a larger bank that implements a chat system for all of their employees, and maybe they connect to all different types of language models. Slowly, they're starting to build out that product over time and maybe integrate with, specific systems that they care about that they want built into that chat functionality, maybe the ability to parse through documents, etc. And a large part of that is actually what we're seeing with MCP, or Model Context Protocol today, which is a open source protocol to do those connections in a standardized way. And then secondly, you see the external use cases. So revenue generating, right? Like, what do your customers actually see and use on the GenAI side? And how does that lead to eventual profits for the business? Now, that's often a more tricky challenge because you're exposing AI models to your customers. And so you need to be able to trust them a lot. And that's actually part of why Anthropic is investing so much in the safety of our models. So as we release models, we do a lot of stress testing. We have interpretability researchers diving into the way models actually think. And so a large portion of that is actually driven by this idea that we need to be able to understand how models think, why they do what they do, and eventually, as you bring them into the market, they're so much more trustworthy for the customers that are using them. I'll pause there. More to be said, though, with respect to specific customers that have seen that as well.
I'm got a double down question on that, actually, but just before I do, for everybody who's watching, just we see you in the chat, and I see Abdulrazik from Egypt. I saw your message there just before. Please engage with it in the chat if you have any specific questions or call outs in the chat. We're going to a global audience right now, so it's no matter what time of the morning, noon, and night it is, it's great to see you on the actual chat. I was interested just what you were just both talking about before. The regulatory, especially in financial services, the regulatory challenges and navigating those regulatory challenges is something that's on top of the mind for lots of our customers and partners. Tell me about your sort of thoughts and feelings about, the regulatory environment is completely different country to country. What we see in Europe with DORA versus the regulatory frameworks we have to navigate in the United States and Asia Pacific, all very different. Tell me what you're hearing from your customers in terms of, what we can do to help them navigate those frameworks, and what they can do to accelerate and be agile in trying to navigate those frameworks, because I know it can be overwhelming for a lot of our customers and partners.
Yeah, Michael, that's a great comment. And the nice thing is, for those dialed in, one of the greatest use cases that we're seeing right now with models like Claude and our financial service partners and our work with AWS is this exact topic. Because if you think about it, how do you follow regulations today? Presumably, you publish them, share them with the employees, you do trainings. If you think about it, it's really instructing humans to follow regulations. It turns out large language models are stunningly good at taking instructions. So I'll give you an oversimplified example. If I uploaded the local regulations for a region, it could be a 1,000-page document. and I said, Claude, here's a customer interaction, or here's an insurance application, take these regulations into account. We're already at a stage today where out of the box, Claude will probably do that faster and more accurately than a relatively untrained human. Very quickly, with some prompting and guidance from folks like Alexander, Claude will do it better than a very well-trained human. And not because that individual doesn't have a ton more value they can add in the value chain. It just, when it comes to following instructions, and that's a message we like to convey to our partners, think of Claude as a very, very good coworker who's very smart and has a very good memory. So if you think of it in that lens, we actually see the regulatory framework as a huge advantage for large language models, because it's very difficult to follow these regulations by market and make sure they're being adhered to. So when you give all of it to Claude, Claude's very good at parsing it out by region, by use case. And what we like to say is, don't take our word for it, test it. This is the types of things we'll help our partners do, set up an eval and be like, look. So that's one of the reasons we're so excited about the work we do in this space. But Alexander, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that example, JP, of benchmarking the models against human performance, because humans have to take a lot of time to read a bunch of documents and then come to certain conclusions, specifically when the content is really complex, like abiding to some regulatory principles. And so we see the models being benchmarked against human performance in certain environments. And the most important piece of that is just having some way of backtesting the quality of your model against that environment that has been operating maybe to date for over 20 years in a legacy system, let's say. And so a large part of the work that we do with customers is actually going in there and trying to understand the data that they have accessible right now, and then how that plays into the way we set up an evaluation to be able to know for certain, like, this is the accuracy of the model in this specific system. And that builds that level of trust that I think a lot of customers are looking for. And then second to that, I would say, AI systems, and specifically as we move into agentic territory, there's a lot of potential complexity, right? You're working with a non-deterministic system that's an LLM. You're trying to integrate a bunch of different sources, maybe from different parts of your business or even external to your business. And there's a lot of stuff that has to go on the engineering side. And so that's actually why we've invested firstly in a lot of out-of-the-box tooling, not only with AWS, but also on our first-party API, things like PDF rasterization, which reduce that level of complexity, so you can just get to a high level of accuracy and performance out of the box. And then secondly, why we're having takes on the open source side too. So as I mentioned before, MCP is basically a way to standardize a lot of the different connections that your AI model might need into a familiar format that follows specific security permissions, either set up by your team or by the team that actually created the MCP server. So, let's say you're connecting to your Salesforce instance. The MCP server designed is actually built by Salesforce to follow all of those principles that I'm referring to. So, quite a lot there.
I know, and it's very important to kind of remember, right? When it comes to Anthropic and AWS, what you have is the better together in the broader security direction that the industries look at. And so with financial services, we've had decades working with some of the most complex institutions, the regulators themselves, and shaping how customers can seamlessly deploy their workloads for machine learning and now for GenAI. So we're taking off strong foundations of data residency. How do you manage your data residency? How do you manage the latency and performance requirements of your applications, the availability that is expected in financial services, the resiliency that's coming up with DORA and some of the other new regulations? We're at the front lines there, meeting with our customers and the regulators, shaping the direction here. So all of this is like ready published content to help our customers in that shared responsibility model. So the foundation on which customers can take off is that ready foundation for the FS industry that AWS has set up. We have experts and specialists publishing this content. They're available for our customer conversations and our partners as well. And then from that, you have Anthropic kind of continuing to evolve on the landscape and kind of build that composable architecture that can really help customers. So that better together really is important as we kind of support our enterprise customers.
Absolutely. Sorry, Addy, you go.
Yeah, I wanted to probably think of a real journey that y'all might have seen, right? Something that we really enjoy on these conversations is what was the real story? How did it play out? Your customer might have started off with 2 developers considering how they could prototype or run an example, and then that moves to a massive scale. Y'all talked about a few examples in our previous Connect, but would be really keen to share some of those case studies and talk about how AWS teams were supporting you as we drove this at scale.
Absolutely. And this is the area that's most fun for us too. So we actually just recently announced our work and partnership with AIG, and this was done in concert with our friends at AWS and Palantir. And that's a great example because it allows us to actually walk through the steps that AIG took, and that's actually public. They've shared that in this case for their underwriting assistant. And the net was what ultimately was taking 3 to 4 weeks in the underwriting process. They ended up reducing to less than a day. And if you think about that journey, we're looped in very early. So a year ago, we get involved with the AWS team to understand what the business problem is the partner is trying to solve for. What role can we play? How can we roll up our sleeves in partnership with AWS to help unlock the true capabilities of Claude in this instance? And how can they get the most out of it? And in that journey, we ultimately will work with the additional partners, in this case, Palantir, to bring it to life, to finesse it and make sure over the course of its development, we're very quickly adopting and implementing the best practices. Because one other very unique aspect, and I spent most of my career at Google, which I would like to say moved pretty quickly. One unique aspect about this space, it moves so fast that even in the course of that 1 year engagement prior to launching the underwriter assistant for AIG, there was 4 or 5 material launches of features or products. And that could be anything from a citations API that allows you to really elegantly cite where the outputs are coming from, to prompt caching, which can meaningfully improve the cost of that deployment. So another advantage to our partnership with AWS is making sure that we bring the latest and greatest to you in a way that's will also help you implement and adapt. So that's just one example that is actually currently live that you could look up on how we worked with AIG and AWS to bring that to life. But Alexander, any other examples you wanted to share?
Yeah, as JP was referring to, we both headed out to Japan kind of end of January to work with Nippon Life and the Resolution Life team. And specifically, we went on site with them for 2 days. We sit down with a room full of engineers, and we talk through the various prompts that they're using, the various architectural decisions they've made in their specific use case. And so we were basically benchmarking against both human performance, to what I was referring to earlier, and another competitor model. And just with working with the engineers, understanding the process a bit better, tweaking the prompts, thinking about how they could use the context a little bit more efficiently, we managed to move the needle from roughly 70% to 90% accuracy in this specific retrieval use case. And so I think it really is that getting people in the room and talking to them and understanding the exact pain points more so than anything that really ends up moving the needle between maybe an unsuccessful GenAI implementation and a successful one. But there are loads of examples where we've done that. So I'll pause there just for time.
I think the one bit to consider is one of the patterns that we've seen work really well at customers is when we are setting up these one-day workshops. We call them game days. It's a fast and rapid way to understand the technologies by applying it for an industry-specific use case. We do this for capital markets, banking, payments, insurance. And by offering that 1 day of workshop, you're really allowing teams to get hands-on with the possibilities of the technology. And something that we often follow up with, and there's really fascinating videos about this on YouTube, is we follow this up with what we call as an experience-based accelerator. And so these are what are also popularly labeled as cloud parties, where we're taking real data sets, real systems inside customer environments and transferring that prototype or proof of concept that was conceptualized into a ready, production deployable journey. And so teams get together and over a set of weeks are assessing existing applications. How could they extract the data from those applications to the pre-POC that they'd proven out, and then find the fastest way to deploy them at scale. And it's all about bringing that working group together. And that's, again, where our partnership and our consulting partners are so important in doing this at scale.
Great call, Addy. I want to get to, I know we're just about down to the bottom of the hour and we're running out of time. I wanted to get to, maybe, Addy, do you just want to call out the calls to action that we have with Anthropic? And then I just wanted to wrap up with a couple of sort of closing comments before we get to the bottom of the hour. So I'll throw it to you for just a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really fascinating conversation, but one of the quick call to actions we have for the audience is definitely join us in May, when we're going to do another webinar as we dive deep into some of these demos and proof of concepts to walk through on how financial services customers can really move fast and get access to ready libraries and code repositories, prompt libraries that can help you. So more to come. The Claude Financial Data Analyst Quick Start is up, and we're going to be sharing the link and the QR code for that. And there's another workshop coming up towards the London Summit at the end of April. So if you are happening to be in London for the summit, please join the Anthropic AWS team at booth D5 for your connect.
Awesome. Yes, looking forward to engaging with all of you there. I think Addy and I will both be at the London Summit as well, and I'm looking forward to also catching up with the Anthropic team in person. Alexander, JP, thank you so much. It has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like we could talk for another half hour. I had a bunch more questions, but the conversation got deep and got interesting. So we'll have to get you back again at some time. Just really, again, appreciate your time. Fascinating conversation about really the heavy lift of balancing or using generative AI on the heavy lift of navigating compliance and thinking about how to really navigate the agentic journey with our customers and partners. I think this year is going to be a fascinating transition again in our industry, and many people say that it'll be the biggest transition our industry has seen in our lifetime, which is very exciting. Thank you very much again, both of you. Look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks in London. And thanks for joining us again on Industries Live. We're looking forward to the next segment with Deloitte in just a few moments, where we'll be talking about more things generative AI and more things compliance. And any last words from the crew? Anything else you wanted to say?
So first of all, thank you so much to Michael and Addy for having us and the crew. And as alluded to, we will be hosting another session in May to go deeper into specific use cases. So make sure to sign up for that. I think we have a QR code we can show on the screen.
Yeah,
that if you can take a moment to scan that, that's the only way to get invited to our next webinar. So don't be shy. Take a moment to scan that. We're grateful again to the AWS team and the partnership. And thank you. And we'll see you guys soon.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you so
JP.
much, AWS team. Great to see you all, and thankful for the partnership. So see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
All the best.